In the first movie of this series, we're going to look at the basics of ArchiCAD. So we'll look at how to start it up with the right settings, and then we'll look at installing the work environment, which adds extra features and functionalities for further down the line. To start the program, depending if you're Windows based or Mac based, you've got various options through Docs, Application, Windows, Start Menu, Desktop shortcuts, etc, etc. In my case, I have a desktop shortcut, and if I double click, that will launch ArchiCAD. You'll see a splash screen, and the next thing you should see after that is this Startup dialog box. This gives us the options to either create projects, open an existing project, which could be either go and look for it either as a solo project or a teamwork project, depending on your version of ArchiCAD, or it might be in a list of projects you've already had open. In this case, I'm going for a new project using the standard ArchiCAD 16 template file, and in terms of work environment, I'm going to switch this to make sure it uses standard profile 16. That's the default setting that ArchiCAD installs with when it comes out the box, and if I apply this, I know that the settings here will be the same as on every other machine that's freshly had ArchiCAD installed. So all I do is click New, and ArchiCAD will continue to load. So this is ArchiCAD now loaded with the default out-the-box settings. I'm not going to do too much with it because there's extra buttons, features and functions I'd like to switch on. So the next thing we'll look at is how to install the work environment. The work environment makes up the screen display itself, the settings, the shortcuts and various other aspects to the software. To make any changes to the work environment, we do this through the Options menu, Work Environment, and then Work Environment. And what I'll do here is just to check at the very top on the left hand side, make sure I've clicked on the work environment profiles, and in here you'll see there's the standard layouting, standard and visualization. These come with ArchiCAD, and then there's a couple of other ones that I've actually already added. But in this case, what I want to do is import the project Hollycroft work environment. So to do anything like that, we're going to use this import button, and this allows me to then locate this particular work environment, which gives me the option here to pick it up and import. However, although I've physically imported this now, I've not yet finished, because what I have to do is select it from this list and choose Apply, and then confirm this by applying again. If I know I was going to continually use this, I could also use the Set as Default option. When I hit OK, the screen will then reconfigure itself. The screen is now reconfigured, and what I'd like to do is just point out some of the main features here. So at the very top, we have various different pull-down menus. These group together common commands into the one place to make it easier to find and locate items. We then have a list of shortcut buttons. Standard ones available, the usual sort of thing like New, Open and Save, Undo and Redo, and then there's some of the more ArchiCAD specific CAD orientated type commands along here, and then there's a little mini navigator at the end as well. The big toolbox that runs down the side is the main palette that drives ArchiCAD. You can see it's broken down into 4 sections. There's a couple of selection tools, there's then design tools which are mainly 3D based, document tools which are mainly 2D based, and then at the bottom there's a further section that at this resolution I have to expand, but these are the tools that we don't use quite so commonly. So I'll just expand these back out for later on. We then have this thing called the info box, which runs across the top of the screen, and this updates and gives us shortcut information to the settings of the active tool. So in this case I'm on the wall tool. If I was to look at the arrow tool, because it's a selection tool, there's not a lot to look at, but if we look at the slab tool, there are different settings. Similar, if I look at the morph tool, different settings again, and if I look at the object tool, there's a further set of settings. So this continually updates and gives us an indication of what's going on. It's also important to check here that we're looking at either the default settings, or in this case if I place an object and then select it, it actually tells me I have one object selected and it is editable. And what I'll do is just use Undo to take that back out. The next big parts of the screen, we have the Navigator to the side, which allows us to work through various different parts of the software. We will come back and look at this in more detail, similar to Trace and Reference, and similar to Quick Options. Across the very bottom, there are some shortcuts that will come in quite useful later on, and there's also this handy coordinate toolbar, which gives us an indication if I put the mouse on this part of the screen. It gives me an indication that I'm about 40 by 17 meters from the origin, and up at the top corner I am roughly 60 by 40 meters from the origin, so it gives us an indication in space where we happen to be within this window. And this window of course is the main feature of the work environment. This happens to be a plan window. If I was to just draw some items and switch to 3D, then the view updates and then shows the appropriate three-dimensional window. But it will also show, if I was to look at an elevation, the elevation for those same elements. So this area continually changes and shows the relevant view that you happen to be working on. Once the work environment's been installed, as we've done in this case, it shouldn't need to be done in the future, unless you were to reinstall ArchiCAD or install ArchiCAD on a fresh machine. One final little note on the interface with the work environment. Both the Mac and the PC versions are set to look pretty much the same, the main differences being based around the actual operating systems themselves. What I've got here is a screenshot showing ArchiCAD 16 running the Windows platform. The screenshot has been taken at 1680 by 1050. This recording's been kept to 1440 by 900 to make sure it's sort of optimised for web streaming, etc. But one of the things you can do on a machine that's got a lower resolution, if you go to the window menu, you can switch to full screen mode. And what this does is remove things like the title bars across the top, and in Windows the start bar across the bottom of the screen. And while I'm in here, what I was going to do was use trace and reference, which is something we'll talk about later on, to just show the difference between the Mac and the PC interface. So here we have ArchiCAD 16, a screenshot taken at 1680 by 1050 resolution, and underneath, if we just roll this back out of the way, here is exactly the same work environment on a MacBook Pro running at exactly the same resolution. You can see as I wipe across the screen, there are differences because Windows has the start bar and it has titles at the top, whereas the Mac has the titles in this part of the interface, whereas Windows is at the very top. But you can see that the buttons are in almost exactly the same place, so whether you choose to use a Mac or a PC, you will find the interface very similar.